5 a.m., 40 or 50 armed FBI agents raided my house. We had armored vehicles, like something you'd see in Afghanistan. We had drones. They had guns pointed on me and my wife. I still don't know what my charges are. I still have no idea what's actually going on. I asked how I can be charged for money transmission when I've never had anyone's money. And she said they have tweets. I laughed. Said, what do you mean they have tweets? Judge Coate comes out, sits on the bench, within the first 30 seconds says, I've read all your motions, I'm denying them. No argument needed. It was just literally denied. One word, denied. At that point, it came home for me. Yeah. They are going to railroad us here. If we don't take the deal, they are not only going to go for the full 25 years, they're going to also put a money judgment on us, $237 million.
It's a living death sentence. You're alive, but you're never going to live.
There's not a single victim in this case. The government agrees to that. There's no victims.
All right, welcome back to the Rice Report, everybody. Eric Rice here, your host, of course, where we talk about the three things you're never supposed to talk about: money, politics, and religion. Depending on the day and the interview, it may be one or all three together. Today, we're going to be talking more about politics and the justice system and where things are right now. I think it's very important. Our guest today is Keonne Rodriguez of Samourai Wallet. I'm going to let him tell a story here because he's going to do more justice than I am. But I think this is a story most people need to hear about right now because he and his partner, Bill, had created basically a privacy technology, and they are now facing 5 years in prison. This is a done deal. He will be going to prison here very soon without a presidential pardon. We're going to ask him some tough questions you probably haven't heard. You've probably been seeing him in the Bitcoin space on podcasts quite a bit lately, and we're going to ask some of the questions that haven't been asked there and address them to the audience and to the people in a forthright manner. But I'll give you a quick rundown before he does. These guys wrote code. This code was designed to create private transactions. In a world of complete surveillance and centralization, this is not something that the government likes, period. They want to know everything that you're doing. And these guys were creating a privacy tool, which I'll let them explain. And they now face incarceration for writing code, which in my opinion is free speech. And I believe that once you have created something like this, a software, a code, a decentralized, centralized, and it was becoming more decentralized as this was happening. But in this process, basically what they've done is they've created a weapon. The war is on your privacy. That is the war that we all fight, whether you realize it or not. Our privacy is being taken. 6G is going to infiltrate all of our privacy at some level. These things are coming. And those who are creating privacy tools are really, really no different than those who are manufacturing weapons for war. And in this case right now, it's no different than a gun charge. You know, someone kills someone else. You can't charge the gun manufacturer legally because they just made a gun. They didn't actually commit crimes. And writing code for privacy is being treated as though the gun manufacturer was pulling the trigger. And that's what we've been watching and witnessing here in the market for probably the last 4 years, 5 years for sure. But really, this has been going on since the dawn of time. The system does not like anyone who goes outside the system, no matter what they're doing. So please welcome Keonne to the show today. Thank you so much for being here, my friend.
Thank you for having me, Eric. Very happy to be here.
Well, let's walk through as concisely as we can, because I know you can get very deep and detailed, and I've heard your story multiple times. The audience hasn't, so please continue to do that. But I'm going to stop you from time to time and just point out, you know, things that I've heard from attorneys on this case. I've heard from advocates on this case. They're wildly, different opinions as to where we are with this case. I'm going to before you get started, I'm going to make my opinion known. Writing code is free speech, period. It's an exercise of free speech. Penalizing that is like violating the First Amendment, and it should always be taken that way, because if they can penalize writing code or free speech, they can penalize you for saying things. Then we end up in a situation like Europe. And that penalizes those who are creating innovations that are actually protecting us from the government. And I also think that everyone deserves a fair shake in court. And I don't think that that's constitutional. And it sounds to me like that may or may not be the case. But we're going to go through that and ask some difficult questions along the way. So Keonne, tell us your story here. I'll let you just run with this for a little bit.
To really tell the story correctly, we need to go back to 2012, before Samourai was even conceived. And that's when I discovered Bitcoin for the first time. And what really interested me about Bitcoin was the censorship-resistant aspect of a digital currency, the separation of money versus state, and the lack of a trusted third party in between me and my transactions. So this was a pretty common entry into Bitcoin in 2012. Most people in the space were interested in these types of things, very libertarian focused movement. and I got in quite heavily. I got into Bitcoin so heavily, in fact, that I decided I needed to find a job in the space. I wanted to contribute my skills to making this technology succeed. And I got a job working at blockchain.com, which was, they had a web wallet that you were able to interact with using a web browser. And the web wallet did not take custody or control. So there was no third parties. This was a really big deal at the time and still is a big deal today. And I worked there until 2016. And I met Bill, who is my partner who would create Samourai Wallet with me later. We met there. I was employee 8, he was employee 7. And we both shared the same ideological vision of what Bitcoin could be. And by that time now, 2015, the priorities within the Bitcoin space were starting to shift. It was starting to be less of like a libertarian ideological separate money from state movement and more of an investment number go up movement. And we were concerned about that, right? Because if you're into Bitcoin for censorship resistance, there's some serious issues with Bitcoin, namely the fact that all transactions are public for anyone to see on the blockchain. And there's a privacy issue with that. If you can't have censorship resistance without privacy. And we wanted to focus more on privacy and less on Bitcoin as some sort of investment vehicle for Wall Street. So we decided then in 2015 to build tools and build software that made our vision of Bitcoin the reality. Even if it was for a small group of people, primarily us, we wanted to build the tools, write the code that would make Bitcoin into or possible to use in a self-sovereign private way. So that's why we created Samourai Wallet. That's why we started building Samourai Wallet together. And the whole point of Samourai Wallet was to focus primarily and almost exclusively on privacy, network privacy, stuff like Tor and VPN support, but more importantly, transactional privacy. So that when you look and a third-party observer looks on the blockchain, they can't really tell what's going on. There's confusion. And that was the primary motivation of all the tools that we built with Samourai Wallet.
Yeah, and I think it's an important thing to note that privacy online is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to be honest with you. Anonymity has always been the goal. I think that people always look at Bitcoin and say it was designed for privacy. It was designed for anonymity. And at that time, you now had exchanges that were popping up that were getting licensing. These exchanges were essentially stealing your anonymity through know your client KYC laws. So if you wanted to buy Bitcoin, you had to put in your name, address, social security number. That was attached to a wallet address, and that ruined your anonymity. So those issues were popping up with the growth of the asset for sure. Walk us through how Samourai was designed and how it works.
Sure. So Samourai was designed primarily as a non-custodial open source software, right? So a non-custodial wallet, that means that the developers of the wallet do not take control or custody of your private keys, of your Bitcoin. That remains with the user at all times. This is different from something like an exchange like Coinbase or Kraken, where they hold custody of the asset on your behalf until you ask them to allow you to send it to a wallet that you control, right? So you buy Bitcoin on Kraken, Kraken has your Bitcoin. It's kind of like a bank in traditional finance. You go to the bank, you deposit $100. That's your $100, but it's not in your control. It's in the control of the bank. So we created software that kept you in total control at all times, never giving up or relinquishing control. You were your own bank.
So does it act like a mixer? Is that kind of the basic philosophy behind that?
So we did have a quote unquote mixer that came much later. That came in 2019. And technically, it wasn't actually a mixer, right? So let's define what a mixer is. A mixer traditionally within cryptocurrency or Bitcoin specifically is I have one Bitcoin and I send it to the mixer. And the mixer at some point sends a Bitcoin back to me that hopefully is disconnected from the Bitcoin I sent to it originally, right? So the point of a mixer is to separate the past transaction history from the future transaction history of the Bitcoin. But in order to do that, you give up custody and control to the mixer. So what Samourai Wallet built in 2019 is something called CoinJoin. And CoinJoin is a type of collaborative transaction. It's something like there's 8 other people who have the same goal that I do, which is to get some sort of privacy in a Bitcoin transaction. And we're going to team up and work together to create a transaction that affords us that type of privacy. So we're getting the same result as a mixer, separating the past activity from the future activity of a coin. But the main difference is we're not giving up control or custody. We're not ever sending that coin out of our possession. What we're doing instead is taking our coin from one address in the wallet that we control and sending it to another address in the wallet we control. So at no point is that coin out of our possession. And you're just doing that with several people all at once, so that when a third party is looking at the blockchain, they can't tell what's going on. There's too much confusion, too many possible combinations between the input side of the transaction and the output side of the transaction.
Yeah, the easiest way to describe this to the general public is thinking of it this way. You go to the bank, you deposit a $100 bill with a serial number that ends in 385. And that serial 385 $100 bill is deposited into the bank. It's technically your $100 bill, but over the course of a year, a month, a day, a week, it gets mixed up with all the other $100 bills. And you go to withdraw a $100 bill and it's serial number 952. Like that is the basis of a coin join. That's exactly how it works. Right, but the banks do this every day, right? They mix your money with other money if you're dealing in cash.
Oh, absolutely. And the only reason I say sort of is because in CoinJoin, you're not depositing your Bitcoin anywhere other than yourself, right? So it's essentially like what you described, except you have a bill in your pocket, in your left pocket, with a serial number 385. And what you do is you take that bill out of your left pocket. It's still in your hand. You move it to your right hand and put it into your right pocket. And somehow between left pocket and right pocket, the serial number changes to 982 because you've never given that dollar bill to anyone else, right? That dollar bill has never left your control.
Definition of
counterparty risk.
Right.
Absolutely. And it's a major important point for this type of technology.
Huge differentiator. And this is just another example. I'll give you an example because I'm going to state this. I don't believe you deserve any prison time for this. Number one, I'm going to state that very clear. And I think we should be fighting for you, regardless of the things that we're going to go through in the next few minutes. However, in this particular scenario, okay, banks do this every day with your money without your consent. We live in a world of total hypocrisy. Keonne, if you were at home right now with a printing machine and you had access to cotton-based paper and the right ink, and you were out there printing $100 bills, that's illegal. The government does it legally daily, right? So this is kind of the awareness I want to raise for people who may not understand the financial system and some of the hypocrisy. Not advocating for money counterfeiting at all. In fact, the exact opposite. I think the government should stop printing money and counterfeiting money and doing that stuff as well. Okay, so we have privacy technologies that allow you to disconnect transactional history, make it more difficult for people to find out what you hold, how you spend it, and where you are financially, which we would all love, right? Like most people don't realize that in 2023, all of our privacy in our bank accounts was completely given up. Intelligence agencies have full access to your transactional history at banks and credit unions right now as we speak. Privacy is a major, major issue. So you have this business that's going along, and when you're offering this service, there's a fee involved, correct?
Correct.
So non-custodial fee, right? So what is the fee? Justify the fee to the world.
Well, I don't really think I need to justify a fee.
I'm asking because people have asked that question before. I don't think you need to justify a fee for a business either, but that this was used in the lawsuit.
Actually, it wasn't, but I will justify the fee. There's 2 parts to it. One, Samourai Wallet was an open source, non-custodial piece of software. Publishing software, writing software, hosting software, it's not free. Okay. You need to pay for that. And I was incredibly proud that we were one of the only non-custodial open source software projects to actually be able to self-sustain ourselves. We weren't making a huge amount of money. We weren't getting fabulously wealthy, but we were able to keep the lights on. We were able to keep the servers running for over 10 years. And I think that, I'm actually very proud of that. So the fee for Whirlpool, the CoinJoin implementation, was twofold. One, to help us keep the lights on, but more primarily, it was an anti-spam mechanism. So think of the fee that you pay when you make a Bitcoin transaction in general. You pay a fee to the miners in order to have that transaction added to the block. The reason there's that fee primarily is anti-spam. If there's no fee, anyone can send anything through in a transaction and blow up people's nodes essentially with junk. And I mean that's happening either way with a fee. Imagine no fee. It's like email. There's no fee to send an email, and you're inundated with spam. If there was some sort of fee to pay to send an email, there would be far less spam. So in a CoinJoin, it's imperative that there's an anti-spam mechanism, because one way to attack a CoinJoin is to become a majority of the people participating in the CoinJoin, right? So if there's 8 people, but I'm a bad actor and I'm 7 of those people, I know the input and output of the 8th person. That's called a Sybil attack. And you try to prevent that from happening by adding a fee. So every CoinJoin implementation, we weren't the only one. Every CoinJoin implementation has a fee. The
right.
fact of the matter is our fee was the lowest, right? Most CoinJoin implementations have a percentage-based fee. So you're paying a percent of the amount that you are CoinJoining. Samurai Wallet didn't do that. It was a flat fee. And so it didn't change regardless of the amount you were CoinJoining. So we certainly weren't getting wealthy off of this, but yes, we had a fee, and I don't think that it requires any defense. I'm proud of it.
I don't. Yeah, this is America, right? So we get charged taxes for breathing. Yeah. So the fact that you're bringing up a private company, at that point in time, it was centralized. So you were running servers, right? So
Yeah,
you have to keep servers. Servers are not cheap, especially when you have a lot of traffic, which you guys had. And at the same time, the defense mechanism, I don't think people understand that paying for things is a strong deterrent for, stupid activities. But at the
absolutely,
same time, I don't think you need to justify it. I'm just bringing it up because no one else has. And
absolutely.
we've had attorneys bring that up as part of the litigation process, which I'll let you speak to how that happened in court. But before we do that, I think it's important to understand also that you charging a fee keeps venture capitalists out. And that creates an environment where you can decentralize the protocol over time and allow it to operate and flow completely on its own. People
Mhm.
don't realize that software companies or technology companies that create great things oftentimes take capital from bad people, and they end up being processes or companies that end up being non-beneficial in their original design. This is a very common thematic in technology, having been in the space for so long. So let's
Yes.
move forward. So this is what you're doing. This is what you're operating. You're operating a flat fee business with a centralized server. At the time you started realizing it's Bitcoin, we want to decentralize this thing. You're supporting yourself with these fees. You're defending the network from spam, and things are going well. And all of a sudden, you get hit with a criminal lawsuit from the SEC under Jay Clayton. I'm going to make it's important to understand
No,
that it wasn't under Jay
no,
Clayton. Oh,
no,
this
it
is the
wasn't
Biden
the SEC.
administration.
Yeah, it wasn't even the SEC. It was the DOJ.
The the DOJ.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you're hit with a lawsuit from the DOJ. Just walk me through the gut punch that you felt that day. Did you see it coming? Did you have any forewarning, or did it just pop up on
No.
you?
Yeah, no forewarning. At 5 a.m. on April 24th of 2024, 40 or 50 armed FBI agents raided my house. We had armored vehicles, like something you'd see in Afghanistan. We had drones. It was the full nine. Um, they, raided the property, had guns pointed on me and my wife, arrested me, detained my wife, and it was everything came crashing down at that point. And no, I had no idea that was coming. We had legal representation as a business. We had engaged with the regulators previously. So I had figured that if there was ever any issue, someone would contact our attorneys, right? Like if the DOJ thought we were running foul of some law, an attorney would be called and say, hey,
Yeah.
have your client come surrender to us or have your client meet with us. And I absolutely would have. I have no violent history. I have no criminal record. I have no indication that there would have been any need for a response like that. And by the way, in the 10 years that we ran Samurai Wallet, we had never once had a law enforcement request, never once had the FBI or any other law enforcement agency write to us and say, give us information about one of your users. Not that we would have really been able to, but the request was never made. So it was a big surprise to say the least.
That's a pretty standard procedure as well. When people think that a business is operating outside the law, that the law reaches out and asks for information.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So
That's what my lawyer said. That this was an unusually aggressive response for the crimes that we were charged with. These crimes get committed constantly by the big banks: J.P. Morgan, HSBC, Deutsche Bank. These crimes are nothing new to these people, and the FBI does not raid the CEO of J.P. Morgan, does not raid the CEO of Deutsche Bank. They call their lawyers and say, "Hey, we're running an investigation, and we need to talk to your client," or come have your client surrender, and we'll book them, and that will be that. A fully militarized raid for a software developer with no history is very over the top, and I feel it was a lot to do with the theatrics of the situation. They wanted to make a big show.
Oh, it was all statement. I mean, I think your entire case is statement based. I don't
Yeah.
think it has any. I'm not a. Let me be fully disclosed. I'm not a lawyer at all. But sending in the FBI, the DOJ on a whim, with guns pointed at you and your wife for literally pushing buttons on a keyboard, like that's the physical offense that they're claiming, is a show of force, and it's certainly to make a statement. So you're raided. What happens after that?
Well, a lot of waiting around in vehicles, to be honest. I was sitting in the back of an FBI vehicle for several hours, waiting for them to do Lord knows what. But long story short, go through the FBI booking process. They take DNA, they take biometrics, they take fingerprints. Go get transported to the jail where they do another booking process. This time by the U.S. Marshals. Biometrics, fingerprints, DNA, all that kind of stuff. At this point, we're now like 4 or 5 hours in from the raid. I still don't know what my charges are. I still have no idea what's actually going on. And it isn't until I'm brought to a room in the jail with a glass divider, and on the other side of that divider is the court-appointed attorney to let me know what's happening. This is the first time I hear about it. So what I find out is that I'm being charged out of the Southern District of New York. I'm not anywhere near the Southern District of New York. I haven't been to the Southern District of New York. I don't have servers in the Southern District of New York. I don't have employees in the Southern District of New York. So I'm thinking, why am I being charged out of the Southern District of New York? And I'm being charged for 2 crimes. The first crime is conspiracy to commit money laundering. And the second crime is conspiracy to operate a money service business without a license. And the first thought in my head at this point is, oh, they've made a mistake. They don't understand how the technology works. They think it's an old school classic mixer, like I described to you earlier in the show, right? Where a user sends me their Bitcoin and I send them back new Bitcoin.
Mhm.
That's what they must think, because that is indeed money transmission and money laundering. But that's not what we were doing. So we can get this cleared up. How naive I was, but that's what that's where my head was at that point. I asked the court-appointed attorney. I said, "Please explain to me how I can be charged for money transmission and money laundering when I've never had anyone's money." Right? Explain to me how I transmit something I never had, how I launder something I never had. And she agreed. She said, if they were actually charging you with those underlying crimes, I would agree with you. But they're not. They're charging you with conspiracy to do those crimes. And conspiracy is the prosecutor's best friend. Conspiracy means they don't really have to prove anything other than that you intended to do those things. And I said, well, what do they have to make them think that I intended to do these things? And she said they have tweets. I'll never forget it. I laughed.
Yeah.
said, what do you mean they have tweets? He goes, you invited Russian oligarchs to use Samurai Wallet on Twitter. And again, I laughed. And we can get into it. I'm sure you'll ask about it. But
Yeah.
let me just say it was not a actual solicitation to Russian oligarchs made on Twitter in English as a as a joke, right? Russian oligarchs are not using Bitcoin to launder their illicit funds. They're
They don't need
using
to.
artwork, they're using jewelry, they're using property in London and Dubai. They're not dealing with Bitcoin. That's Mickey Mouse stuff to them. So it was a clear joke. So I'm just thinking all these things. And she basically tells me, she says, look, no one in this district, I'm in the district of Western Pennsylvania, no one here wants you or knows who you are. They didn't bring these charges. So let's just get you back home on bail so that you can actually fight this case, get a lawyer and fight this case in the Southern District of New York. So that's what we did. We focused on getting a bail package so I could go home that night and begin the process of defending myself against the Department of Justice.
Not an easy task, a daunting feeling. I'm sure your pit of your stomach is dropped completely. They caught completely off guard with charges that don't make sense to you. And I think it's interesting. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but the fact that you can arrest somebody for conspiracy is kind of a thought crime. Like, we think that they're going to do this and we're going to arrest them because we think that they intend to do this in the future. There's two ways to look at it, right? Like, it's a protection method, right? There are certain, like, you're conspiring to murder someone. And you have grounds to say that you're going to shoot somebody on X date and it's 4 months in advance and you have evidence of that. I think that's the case. But when you have a software, again, it's like a gun. You're making a gun, you're building a weapon, you're selling it in the open market. People can use it for whatever they want. That's their decision. That's why gun manufacturers aren't sued currently. That's why they want to sue them, because it penetrates constitutional rights again. Which is an intention of some administrations in the past. I don't think this one is that this is the case where we are currently, but certainly the last one was all about it. They certainly wanted to go after them. Now, at this point in time, what happens to your funds? So they want to send you back to Pennsylvania. They want you to be able to hire a lawyer and defend yourself. Do you have the funds to do so at the time?
Not really. So since 2012, I have been earning and working for Bitcoin, right? And most people would think, oh, you must be loaded. 2012 Bitcoin, wow, you must be very rich. Not the case at all. You're earning in Bitcoin. That means you're spending that Bitcoin to live, right? Rent, groceries, all the little things that you spend on in life, you have to spend your Bitcoin to do that. And investing in a business, investing in building Samourai Wallet. A lot of our Bitcoin, early day Bitcoin, went into that.
Yeah, you're self-funded and fee generated. So you're a self-sustaining entity. Yeah.
Correct. So there wasn't a huge nest egg to work with to begin with. But there was a possibility of finding a lawyer who accepted Bitcoin directly and understood Bitcoin enough to want to work on this case. So I felt pretty good. But then what happened is the court put a restriction on us and said, you can't use cryptocurrency directly or indirectly, meaning we weren't able to send Bitcoin to our attorneys that we found who would accept it in order to pay our legal fees. So that became a big problem, a big early problem to solve. And I solved it. I took some loans from friends who allowed me to loan me enough to get me a retainer with a good law firm. And then a promise to that law firm to eventually pay them once that restriction was lifted on us. So, long story short there, we were able to get representation. Very happy with the representation that we were able to secure. Thought they did a great job and are doing a great job. But it was very dicey there in the early days, a day or two after the arrest, trying to get representation with those conditions.
That's a full-time job, right? As soon as you get home, it's a full-time job. Calls, emails, text messages, asking friends. Keonne, I'll give you something I don't think we've talked about on Twitter Spaces or anything yet. When I first heard about this case was 2024, and it was on the way to Nashville to Bitcoin 2024. I was in the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, and I went to Maggiano's. Across from the gate, I was hungry, and I sat at the bar, and there was another guy sitting at the bar. Neither one of us were drinking. We were just eating at the bar. And I don't remember how the conversation started, but I ended up talking to him. He ended up being the head of Dojo, which is a partner you guys had. And he told me this whole story. So let me summarize what you just said. Your assets, the assets that you had a majority of your wealth in, were frozen immediately. And now you had to retain a legal representation, which is never cheap. Guys, legal representation is exceptionally expensive in the system, especially for federal cases. It's a amplified number,
especially in the Southern District of New York. We're talking
the
about
most expensive.
The most expensive. We're talking Manhattan. It's very, very expensive.
Yeah, when you're paying, $12,000 for a 400 square foot apartment, fees go up quite a bit in that region. But I had heard kind of the story about this, how your business was shut down, your assets were frozen, so were theirs. They were going through the same thing. And then I watched for the next year of almost no one on the internet talking about this. They were talking about the Ripple case and all these other cases, whereas those companies have the money to hire attorneys, and they were going after the little guys who didn't, whose assets were frozen. So this brings up a great question I heard in a space the other day. I think it's one to address, is that you were offered a public defender, federal public defender on site, and you sought private counsel. So not that that's unusual. I don't think. I don't know. Something I learned in this Twitter space, which I try to learn from everyone, is that federal public defenders are a heck of a lot better than the guy at the county. That they're very skilled and things like that. Is that something you knew at the time?
Yeah, of course. I knew that I had the right to be represented by a federal public defender, and I knew that the public defenders federally are phenomenal litigators and attorneys. They are some of the best, in fact, because they are constantly fighting. They're constantly in court in front of the judge and in front of juries. The issue, though, with taking a federal defender in this case is the sheer amount of discovery that the government was going to produce. We're talking terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of data. One of Bill's lawyer put it that if you printed out every piece of evidence on a piece of paper, it would stack to the moon and back like 13 times. The amount of data was enormous. And it's not like it was all evidence against us. It's like my email inbox from Gmail, which I've had since 2004. Every single email is part of discovery. So someone needs to go through that and read everything or sift through it to find what's relevant or not. It's a discovery tactic the government uses all the time, right? Drown the defendant in paperwork because they have to pay Manhattan lawyers to go through that. So there was the fact that this was a complex case. It wasn't a simple case. The federal defenders, no matter how wonderful they are, and they are wonderful, they are time crunched. They do not have the resources to dedicate 2 years to this one case. They have other clients too. And that's where the issue comes in with federal defenders. So we felt that it was in our best interest to get private counsel who could focus on this case and only this case as in our interest. I mean, we were looking at 25 years. This is not a time to be messing around. So the armchair legal, people on Twitter or X or whatever it's called, they don't know. They haven't been face to face with the Department of Justice. They haven't faced a 25-year prison sentence for a non-violent code, So it's easy for them to say, oh, just get a federal defender. But it's not that simple.
Yeah, it's your life. You're protecting your life, and you want to have the best representation you can have that can dedicate time. I think it's important to note that at this time in American history, people were committing rape and murder and being set free without bail. That's just how the legal system was working at the time. It's still that way in many areas, but it's certainly getting cleaned up, thank God, at this point. But at this juncture where you're going through this right now, there are people literally committing murder and being sent home free with zero cash bail within 24 hours. So they don't care about criminals killing people. The legal system, the Southern District of New York was prosecuting the president of the United States at this time for mortgage fraud he did not commit. And they're coming after you now for writing code and a conspiracy for something that your users could do. You literally could not be a money transmitter because you absolutely never handled anyone's actual money. So these
Correct.
are trumped up charges, for lack of a better term. And now you're finding yourself there. So it's good. I wanted to address the federal prosecutor topic. Again, very specific lawsuit. This has never, I would assume that a public defender, probably even your private attorney, had never actually defended a case like this because it didn't exist until
Correct.
then.
Correct. Yeah, this is a completely novel new Biden DOJ theory
Yeah.
that is just they brought up, right? They for the first time are saying software developers are actually can be financial institutions, and they're saying for the first time that actually you don't need to take control of anyone's money to transmit their money. You know, it's complete upside down bizarro world stuff, but they're federal prosecutors, so they can get up and make these wild novel theories, and we have to live with the consequences, right? We have to defend against them. So yeah, my lawyers had never seen anything like this. They thought it was shocking. And most Manhattan attorneys in private practice were formerly prosecutors, right? That's just the way, that's the nature of the beast. So my attorney was a former SDNY prosecutor. And he said to me, we would have never brought a case like this. This case doesn't make any sense. You know, so and that was good to have an attorney who understood just how off the wall this was. And a federal defender would probably agree that it's off the wall. But again, novel new case with a huge amount of time investment that I wasn't going to get their full attention. It's too big of a risk when you're looking at 25 years.
Now let's get into this discovery in the court case. So walk us through now that you have an attorney, they have an attorney, the battlefield is set. You're stacked with a mountain of nonsense that you need to dig through. Instead of them saying, here are the pieces of, and this is how it works, here are the pieces of evidence we're going to use against you. Instead of giving you the needle, they give you the haystack, and you have to find the
Right.
needle that they're potentially going to use. So walk us through, as the proceedings begin, walk us through the story of how this all went down, because it's truly, it's dumbfounding, scary, and yeah, I know you don't want to tell the story again, I'm sure, but
Oh,
please
it's
walk us through
fine.
that.
Yeah, no, it's no problem at all. So, I mean, we go through the discovery process at this point for about a year, where the government is producing new batches of discovery, and we go through them in order to keep costs down. I'm also doing the job of an attorney, an associate, going through it myself. That saves one salary from having to do it, and trying to find whatever it is they might be interested in. And the the overall consensus at this time is they really don't have a lot, right? They have a pretty flimsy case. There's a lot of public tweets and public statements, but that smoking gun that shows intent, that shows collusion with criminal activity doesn't exist. And I knew it didn't exist, but it's not there. It's not in the discovery. It's not in the evidence. So we're
Let's walk through
feeling
the let's walk through the tweets, because that's a
sure.
topic I don't think people have addressed. You know, one of the tweets is Samurai Wallet can be used to clean dirty Bitcoin,
I
right?
don't know if that's a tweet. Is that a tweet?
It was on Dread, I think, the dark web
Okay, so that's a dark web post
message board.
m-
Yeah,
made by Bill. So I didn't really use the dark web, but I know Bill did at some points, and I didn't know exactly what he was posting on there. But here's how I would explain that. Something that we got used to very early on in Samurai Wallet is we had a huge amount of non-native English speaking users,
mhm.
and we had Spanish users. We had actually a really big Spanish South American user base. Really, anywhere that there was a government that was pretty authoritarian, we would have a large user base there, including Iran. And you get used to the fact that they don't have a command of the English language like we do, right? So, like, I wouldn't have said you can clean dirty Bitcoin, right? Because it's just not an accurate, really an accurate representation of what CoinJoin even is.
Right.
But to a non-technical, non-native English speaking person, that gets the point across pretty well, right? Instead of saying, well, you have deterministic inputs associated with this UTXO, and the only way to break those deterministic links is to go through a collaborative transaction where the past history is dissolved from the future activity. They're going to be like, what?
Right.
So you say, you clean the dirty Bitcoin, you know,
Right.
and there's not a lot of context there that I can think of, other than he was simplifying and dumbing it down for whoever he was talking to. Just because it's on the dark web doesn't mean anything,
Right.
right? It's just another website that people go to, and it's not surprising in the slightest that you're going to find a group of people who would be interested in using the type of tools we created on the dark web, because the people that are on the dark web want to be avoiding surveillance. That's why they're there.
Yeah.
So that's all I can say to that. Again, it wasn't me who wrote those. That this is just um, my read on it. Because
We'll talk about the
these,
tweet. The tweet. I'm
sure,
surprised Russian oligarchs aren't using it or something like that. These are
yeah, I
important things
remember
to
that one.
address, and I appreciate you doing that because most people
Absolutely,
like. I'm going to state this again. I don't think you should be going to prison. I think this is one of the more ridiculous cases in the world. But I'm trying to give a both sides approach to this to say, here is how they justified getting you where you are.
yeah,
Is that okay? Like, it's the way the world works. Of course, like if you put something on the internet, you will, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law is not a joke. I mean, that's something that's real. But is that the right thing to do? All right. So this tweet, which I read, yeah, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 times.
yeah.
I kind of chuckled at it because I saw it as
It's a
being
joke,
sarcastic. Is like, oh, because you were
correct?
being accused of these things on the internet. I mean, people don't realize how many attacks are coordinated against privacy tools, sovereignty tools, Bitcoin. I mean, how many ghost stories exist about Bitcoin by itself? So walk us through that.
Yeah. So I mean, this was a joke. It was a sarcastic tweet, and it was I forgot what the news article I was retweeting, but I retweeted a news article. It was something to do with either the U.S. or the EU sanctioning Russian oligarchs. That was the kind of the headline, and I retweeted that news article and said, "Welcome new Samurai Russian oligarch Samurai Wallet users." Right, and it was a joke. And if you actually look at my Twitter history and search "welcome new," you'll find 16 to 18 different
Yeah.
"welcome new" posts, right? And it was what we would call a meme format. So, for example, the Federal Reserve at one point had a rule that said any Federal Reserve employees can't trade Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. I retweeted that news article and said, "Welcome new Federal Reserve Samurai Wallet employees or users." Japan added 100% income tax on Bitcoin. Welcome new Japanese Samurai Wallet users. Kuwait did something, authoritarian. Welcome new Kuwaiti Samurai Wallet. So it was a meme format for when the government did something that actually ends up being unenforceable because of Bitcoin. Welcome new, people. They say
Which I
that
tip my
was a
cap to. I think
clear
it's clever.
intent.
That's clever marketing.
Yeah,
It's marketing.
it was
That's
just
what
it
it
was
is.
clever marketing. It's marketing. And we didn't have a marketing budget. We didn't have a PR guy. We didn't have a marketing intern. It was just me on the computer. Again, we have to keep our costs low, so it was just me doing guerrilla marketing on Twitter or X or whatever it is. And someone asked me if I regretted making that tweet. Absolutely not. I thought it was funny. I still think it's funny. And I don't think even using the government's clearly biased view, I don't think they think that was me actually soliciting Russian oligarchs,
Oh, they were
right?
just
I don't
using it. Yeah.
that Russia was the boogeyman of the day, and they were able to bring that into the indictment and say, look, this guy is enticing our enemy to use his software. Okay, so that was top and center in the indictment.
The top and center, and
Yeah,
they used it for political ploy because it made the news and all that kind of stuff. These guys are using it for this. It's actually not what the tweet says if you use any sort of critical thinking at all. But you got to admit it put a target on your back, right? Like in
yeah,
retrospect, because like you said, I don't regret making the tweet because it's exercising your free speech. Like we're
yeah,
forgetting that this is actually a free speech case in many different ways. Code is free speech. Your actual speech on Twitter is free speech. Sarcasm is free speech. Marketing is
yeah.
free speech. I see marketing for all kinds of disastrous, dangerous things every day that no one goes to jail over. Pornography, drugs, alcohol, all these dangerous things. It's totally okay. But you make a joke about a Russian oligarch, you end up in the Southern District of New York.
Yeah, I mean, it may have put a target, perhaps, but I still don't. I think if you start to self-censor yourself because you don't want to become the target of the government, they've already won.
I agree.
They've already won. So I again, maybe it did put a target on my back, but it's not something I would do any different. I think it was a good joke, and I thought it was funny then, and I think it's funny now. And even if I hadn't made that tweet, the DOJ wanted to take us down, so they would have found another tweet.
Sure.
I have better ones than that. That didn't even make it into the indictment. Surprisingly. So they would have found something that they were able to use, or they would have been able to twist something out of context.
No, I completely agree. So thank you for addressing that. I know that hasn't been brought up in many things. So let's go through the court case, because that is the actual travesty that we're discussing here. Now you're getting ready to go head to head with the other attorneys. You've gotten through this mountain of paperwork, literally to the moon and back. You've got the pieces. Have they given you have given your attorneys any insight as to what they plan to use?
No. They weren't, not at this point yet. So we're only a year in. We're going through discovery, but we find something out, and it was only really by chance that we did. So I don't know what inspired my attorney to do this, but he wrote to the government and asked them, said, have you ever had any conversations with FinCEN, which is the regulator in charge of money transmission, the Financial Crime Enforcement Network? Have you ever had any conversations with FinCEN about my client or about Samourai Wallet? And the government responded eventually and said, yes, we have. But we didn't turn that over to you in discovery. So they turned over, 14 times to the moon and back of discovery papers, but they somehow forgot this one piece.
Oops.
And in federal criminal procedure, there's something called the Brady material. And this is evidence that the government may have that is good for the client, good for the defendant, exculpatory for the defendant. They have a legal obligation to hand that over to the defense. You cannot keep that to yourself. The Supreme Court has said that. And so they forgot to hand over this email that they had with the regulator in charge of money transmission. And we find out that not only did they speak to the regulator 6 months before indictment, but they asked the regulator, is Samourai Wallet a money transmitter as per your regulatory framework? FinCEN said no. They don't take custody of anyone's funds, therefore they're not a money transmitter. In 2013, FinCEN said, in order to be a money transmitter, you have to take custody of the customer's funds, right? Clear, common sense regulation. You can't transmit something you never had.
Right.
In 2019, they reiterated that, said it again, and even said, if you are an anonymity service provider, an anonymity software provider, like a Mixer or a Tumblr, and you don't take custody, you are not a money transmitter. Couldn't be clearer. So when the government went to them 6 months before indictment and asked them if they thought we were a money transmitter, they said no. The government had that information pre-indictment, indicted us anyway as unlicensed money transmitter, even though the regulator in charge of issuing the licenses said we didn't need a license. They didn't care, indicted us, and then they hid that email and that letter for a year and did not hand it over to us. So this was a pretty big bombshell in the case. And we wanted to do something about it.
Now, there were some legal things I didn't understand there because I'm not a lawyer and never care to be. FinCEN's letter, I guess, doesn't hold a whole lot of weight with the DOJ. They don't have to listen to it.
Right. So that's what the DOJ's response to our concerns were. The DOJ came to the conclusion that FinCEN's guidance was just guidance and that they didn't have to follow that guidance. But I did. I had to follow that guidance, and everyday Americans have to follow that guidance.
Yeah, if you were custodying money, FinCEN would be the one kicking in your door.
Correct. Yes. So if you are a money service business like a bank and you don't get a FinCEN license, you're going to have problems.
Yes.
Right. FinCEN is a part of the Department of the Treasury. So they are a pretty important regulator, a pretty powerful regulator. So the DOJ's new theory, again, one of the new theories in this case that we're seeing, is that actually FinCEN saying something doesn't really matter. And we have the latitude to take it on board or not. Doesn't matter to us. That brings up a whole host of other issues like due process, right? That's a constitutional right that defendants have. You have the right to due process. If you're relying on advice from the regulator, and then the government comes in through the Department of Justice and says, it doesn't matter what the regulator says, you have no way of knowing what you're doing is illegal or not.
Right.
So there's due process violations all around this case, frankly. But yeah, so the government did say, doesn't matter what FinCEN said. We make the rules here.
I mean, just another authoritarian structure in this case, which is overwhelming constantly. And I don't want to, you've gone in deep into the case and many other podcasts, and I want to kind of keep it concise and choppy. Sure. Actually, I think choppy is actually a good way to understand it. Some of the nuances here are really important. Number one, you're now dealing with the DOJ, federal attorneys, the Southern District of New York. Bills are mounting. There's a lot of people out there with concerns. I think it's important to note that the Bitcoin Policy Institute raised you about $1 million for your legal fees, right? So there was support coming from the community, and now you're in a position where you're getting into the court case itself. You're assigned a judge. Take us from Judge A to Judge B. I think that's a very important piece of this story.
Yeah.
And the lack of opinions based on motions. So walk us through that. These are really important pieces.
Absolutely. They are important pieces. So when the case was unsealed on April 24th of 2024, you get assigned a judge. It kind of like happens like a lottery. So you don't know what judge you're going to get. There's some computer program in the Southern District, and it says, oh, you've been assigned Judge Berman in our case. So we are assigned Judge Berman, who's an older guy, probably late 70s. So kind of tough, right? You're having a case that involves a lot of technical things
that he may not understand.
That he almost certainly won't understand.
Right.
It's kind of tough, but he seemed to be a pretty good judge from the little that we interacted with him. So we got Judge Berman. And Judge Berman is our judge for the majority of the time that we're fighting this case, for a year and some change. And we're in the process now, in a year and some change, of it's almost time to submit all of our motions for before trial begins. So your pre-trial motions all need to be submitted by this date. And that was a date set by Judge Berman. So we submitted a lot of motions, but the ones will touch on very briefly, the FinCEN letter that I just described, that became a motion. That was like, Judge, there was a Brady violation here. And we want answers as to why, and we want to know if there was any more conversations with FinCEN. So that came into a motion. The second motion was the motion to dismiss, probably the most important motion in any criminal trial, right? And the way a motion to dismiss works is you assume that everything the government has said in the indictment is true. It's not, but you assume that it is for the purpose of the motion. So all those tweets, yes, even if those tweets were made to entice Russian oligarchs, even if all of that is true, it still should be dismissed as a matter of law, right? Because the judge decides law, the jury decides facts. So we're focusing on the law. So we write a very good motion. You said something a little earlier about gun manufacturers being sued for the actions that people take with their guns. That was one of the cases we actually cited in our motion to dismiss. Happened very recently. The country of Mexico sued a gun manufacturer here in the United States for a gun crime happening in Mexico. Came all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court, of course, threw it out.
Yep.
So we cited that. We cited a case from the 1940s where a sugar distributor sold sugar to a bootlegger who was making illegal alcohol during Prohibition. Government came down on him for conspiracy. Supreme Court threw it out. Said, just knowledge of a crime is not enough to join the conspiracy. You have to actually join the conspiracy. And other cases, we had a very strong motion to dismiss. That was put on the docket. And as we were just discussing, it's very unlikely the judge doesn't really know. It's very likely the judge doesn't really know about Bitcoin. So to remedy that, there's something called an amicus brief. And that would be like Bitcoin Policy Institute, Coin Center, various organizations could write to the judge and explain certain things about Bitcoin. Say, hey, judge, this is what custody means. This is what non-custodial software means. This is what a Bitcoin node does. Just things to educate the judge. So these were our main motions on the table that we were going to argue. And then two or 3 days before we were set to go argue, the judge changes. And this is very unusual.
So very unusual. They're bringing in a relief pitcher at this point. You've put in all this work with one judge.
Yeah.
What was the reason they gave you for changing judges?
No reason. They didn't give us a reason. We just got a notification says Judge Berman is no longer on the case, and Judge Coate is taking over. This was again, seriously unusual. Normally in a criminal trial, you get assigned that judge at the beginning and that you see that judge throughout the entirety of the case. Even if you get convicted and go to jail, the next time you want something done about the case, like you say, Judge, I need to go home, or compassionate release, or I have an issue in the jail, you're still seeing that original judge, right? That judge is with you the whole time. It's incredibly unusual to have a judge change. Like, it could happen if the judge gets sick, for example. But that didn't happen in this case. Judge Berman was still
recuse himself or anything. It was just bringing a relief pitcher.
Suddenly we have a new judge. And I'll never forget the demeanor that our attorneys called us to let us know. It was like the demeanor that you have when you're telling a family member that a loved one has passed away. It was a somber demeanor. And he's like, we got Judge Coate. And, I don't know who Judge Coate is. I've never heard of this woman. So it turns out she has a reputation. Let's put it that way. She is incredibly pro-prosecutor. She was not only a former prosecutor in the SDNY, she was the former top prosecutor in the SDNY. She was the head of the criminal division, the same group of people that are coming after me right now. She was the head honcho, person in charge. So she is a prosecutor through and through. Not great for a criminal defendant. No. She also had the reputation of being a max sentencer. So if you go to trial and you lose, you're getting the max. A lot of judges will have some compassion or think, well, maybe 25 years for this crime is a little too much. So maybe we'll do 11 and that will be enough to teach him a lesson. Not Judge Coate. If she could give 25 years, she's giving 25 years. So that's scary. That's absolutely scary. So that was concerning, to say the least. But those are the cards that have been handed to us.
So she's the one receiving the motions now.
So she has the motions in front of her now. Judge Berman never ruled on them because we went to go argue in front of him. Right? So you write the motions first. Judge, you write your motion. Government writes their response to your motion. And then the judge wants to hear arguments about the motion in front of him. That's where we were at in the process. But then the judge changes. So now we're going to have to give arguments in front of the new judge, Judge Coate, who's had 2 days to read our motions and get caught up on the case.
And learn Bitcoin and, learn all the things that the judge previously had to learn, the education involved in the case, all the motions aside, just learning, I'm not trying to belittle judges or attorneys, but no one on earth can learn all this stuff in 2 days.
No,
you just
not
can't.
At all. Yeah. No. And we're not the only case she has, right? There's other cases on her docket. So
2 days is actually more like 2 hours in reality.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But these are the cards that were handed to us, and all we can do is just deal with it. So we go to court on the day we were told to appear. We're ready to argue. We have our motion to dismiss. We have our Brady violation motion. We have our simple motion for amicus briefs. We're ready to go. Judge Coate comes out, sits on the bench. Within the first 30 seconds says, I've read all your motions. I'm denying them. And there was no argument. No argument needed. She just denied it. And on top of that, is
this a normal process? So did your attorney say like this has happened before, or is it uncommon?
That it can happen, right? If a judge has read everything and is convinced through the written filings, they may not need oral arguments, right? They may already know what they want to do. But many judges will still allow the oral arguments because there's a chance you might persuade them the other way in that oral argument segment. So many judges even if they think they're going to go one way, they'll hear the arguments in person, and maybe that changes their mind.
They're a judge.
They're a
By
judge.
nature, they're supposed to hear both sides of a story and determine what is fact and what is fiction.
Right. So most of the time, there's oral arguments. Not always, but most of the time. What there almost always is, though, whether there's oral arguments or not, is an oral or verbal opinion as to why the judge is denying the motions. Because that gives you, the defendant, and your attorneys insight into the way the judge is thinking, insight into why the judge wasn't convinced by your arguments, and stuff that you can even bring up on appeal later on and say, the judge said XYZ, but really that's not the law and that's ripe for appeal. We didn't get any of that. She just denied the motions and didn't write an opinion as to why she was denying the motions. She denied the motions and didn't even say an opinion verbally as why she was denying the motions. It was
Just
literally
denied.
one word: denied. Let's move on. At that point, it came home for me. I was like, oh, we don't have a shot at this.
Yeah.
They are going to railroad us here. And now we have this judge. If we get railroaded here, we're going away for 25 years.
I mean, how could you not think that if there's no opinion? And this is the one thing. So I love hearing both sides of the story from, you know, attorneys and then also from advocates, because they're two different things. But zero attorneys that I have talked to about this, couple I've listened to online, couple I called in person who had followed the case. Every one of them said that, you know, they don't blame you for taking a plea deal after not getting an opinion on your motions. This is a scary moment. I try to get into people's, at this point in time, you have to absolutely feel helpless, like a little worm on a big hook at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's the feeling throughout the whole process. But at this point, it becomes very evident, right? Because earlier in the process, we have the Brady violation. We have good evidence on our side.
Sure.
So you feel like there's a fighting chance. But then you realize that even with all this evidence on your side and the fighting chance you have, they're going to handicap you. You know, maybe you have a really good swing, but they're going to tie your hands behind your back. You know, maybe you can run real fast, but they're going to shackle your legs.
Yeah, they just
And
did.
they just did. Exactly. And it became abundantly clear that this judge wasn't going to allow us to make the case we wanted to make, wasn't going to allow us to do an advice of counsel defense, which is a really strong defense against conspiracy charges, because we had a lawyer. We got legal advice. The lawyer said what we were doing was legal. Strong defense.
Finn
But the
said
judge,
that what you were doing is legal.
that's the second thing. That wouldn't have been allowed in either. We got wind that the judge wasn't going to allow FinCEN to even be said in trial.
Did the
Right?
judge say
So
why? Or
what do
just
you
said, I'm
think?
not allowing it? Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
So you realize that then at this point that it's really not about the jury hearing all the facts and then determining the truth of the matter. It's, what is the jury even going to hear? What is the jury even going to be allowed to know about this case? And it became really clear to me that the jury was going to be allowed to learn just enough to convict us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And once convicted, 25 years was going to happen. People say, oh, it's a scare tactic to get you to plea. No, I know for a fact. I was sitting in front of that judge. I know she would have given the full 25 years.
Yeah, there's a certain feeling you get seeing how people say things.
Mhm.
And when you hear denied with no opinion, I'm sure that the way that was delivered was a very subconscious closing door, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So now you basically are in a trial. You're spending a lot of money. Federal defense is not cheap. You're talking thousands of dollars per hour, multiple attorneys on
Easily.
a case, paralegals there. And these people, this is a huge case. They are pouring hours into this, and those hours all cost money. You and your partner, who's 67 years old, are facing 25 years in prison. So just some basic math. He's 92 when he gets out, 93 when he gets out, which means he's probably not getting out.
Right.
You're a young man. I think you're 39. Is that right?
37.
37. Okay. You look great, man. You look great. So I wouldn't even pin you at that age. I would think you're like 32. You're a young man. So for you, looking at that, the fruitful time of your life, your 40s and 50s, which is where the fruit occurs, those are now in your mind behind bars. There's no kids, there's no family, there's no Christmas dinners, there's nothing. And your attorneys come back to you. What do they say after the motions are denied without opinion? Is that their opinion the same?
Yeah, I mean, they were surprised. Like you said, you've talked to attorneys about this case. Everyone is kind of like, "Whoa, that's unusual," right? Because it is. Normally, an opinion is given.
It's a pigeonhole.
Yeah, absolutely. So they were definitely surprised, but I think they were trying to have a brave face on at that time and say, "Well, keep going, keep fighting, keep doing what we're doing." And at that point, I was already starting to think like, if there's a deal, we should take it. But prior to this, there had been no deals. No one had offered us a deal, and we didn't go looking for a deal because we were going to fight this all the way. And then all of a sudden, as if magic, the next day, the government comes to us with a deal.
The next day.
Right? Yeah, the next day. I think actually the same day they started broaching the subject with my lawyer, saying, "Hey, well, what would your client say about a deal?" And then the next day came the deal. And again, we had been through this process now for well over a year. They had never come to us with a deal, and we had never gone to them for a deal. Now we get a new judge. New judge denies everything, makes it very clear what's happening here, and then suddenly we're offered a deal.
As if by magic.
As if by magic, right? Yeah. Totally, yeah, total coincidence.
What's the deal they offer you?
They offer they are going to get rid of the conspiracy to commit money laundering, which is the 20-year sentence, if we would plead guilty to conspiracy to operate an unlicensed money transmission business, which is a 5-year sentence. Of course, this is what FinCEN said we didn't need to do,
exactly.
But that's what they want. And if we don't take the deal, they are not only going to go for the full 25 years and a medium security designation, as opposed to a minimum security designation, they're going to also put a money judgment on us of $237 million. And that we would be responsible for paying. The life is over. It's that they're making it very clear. You don't take this deal, we are going to ruin you.
It's a living death sentence. A living death sentence. You're alive, but you're never going to live.
Exactly. And that's exactly right. And in return for taking the deal, they would accept $6 million instead of $237 million.
Where did they come up with the $237 million number? Is that the amount of Bitcoin that had run through the system? Where did this number come from?
So there's several numbers, and it comes from the indictment. The indictment claims, and I don't know if this is true or not. We didn't have the opportunity to double check their numbers, so we're just going to assume it is true for the purpose of this discussion. The indictment claims that $2 billion worth of Bitcoin was used through our software. They then claim that
you have never possessed,
that we never touched. We never touched or possessed it. That our users, over the course of the 10 years that it was operational, sent apparently $2 billion worth of Bitcoin through our software that we never had. Of that $2 billion, they claim that $237 million was the proceeds of illicit activity or crime. So that could be drugs, that could be
how in the
guns,
world can they determine
hacking. I don't know. And like I said, I haven't verified that's true.
Because I don't think you can. I don't think that number is verifiable. How do you tie something that's privately held? Like, let's just look at this critically thinking. Your system provides privacy. Somehow they figured out through a privacy breach that doesn't exist that $237 million is used for illicit activities that no one else had been arrested for. It's a made-up number.
That's a key. That's a key aspect, right? Because no one has been arrested for those crimes, right? There's not one criminal who actually did crime on trial here in this case, and not even as a witness against us. There's none of that doesn't exist. There's not a single victim in this case. The government agrees to that. There's no victims. But we can't verify this, but we're assuming what the government is saying is true, just for the purpose of this number. So their claim is $237 million was illicit. So of the 2 billion, that's 10% roughly, right?
Right.
That's a lot lower than cash. And that's a lot lower than some banks. It's really not a bad number. But because I knew it was possible for criminals to use my software, that's where they say the crime occurred. They don't claim that I had specific knowledge. They've never provided one piece of evidence of me talking to a criminal, talking to a drug dealer or a hacker or a weapons dealer. That conversation never exists, right? It's only these public statements that are twisted, where they can try to squeeze out intent out of it. But anyway,
That's like
and
that's like claiming. So if this is where we're going in the judicial system in this country, then every screwdriver manufacturer in the world is guilty, because
correct.
I read somewhere that something like 140 people a year are killed by stabbing from screwdrivers. So if that's the case, a screwdriver manufacturer is well aware it could be used as a weapon to kill
Of
people.
course.
Well
Of
aware of
course.
that, right? So it just gets more ridiculous. So you have, guys, I hope
So
you're
there's just one more number.
please, yeah.
So 2 billion total, 237 million illicit, apparently. And then 6 million is what they say we earned over a 10-year period in total off of that 2 billion that had gone through the software. So the fees that Samurai had earned over 10 years amounted to 6 million. So what they said is, you give us the entire 6 million, wipe out all your earnings to zero, and we will consider the 237 million judgment satisfied. That was part of the deal.
Had you made 6 million over a 10-year period, it's not a lot of money, guys. Like $600,000 business over 10 years is not a thriving company. That's $50,000 a month. That's barely enough to keep your lights on and pay
and
yourself.
that wasn't profit. That was just revenue.
Yeah, gross.
Right? That was gross. So I can't confirm completely. I think it was probably roughly somewhere around there, because we were able to make that payment to them. So that there was that money available
In Bitcoin?
In Bitcoin, yeah.
So now they like Bitcoin.
Well, they
when they're
sold it
getting paid
immediately.
So you are part of the contributor to the strategic Bitcoin reserve.
Oh no, you would think that. You would think that because that's an executive order that the president put forward shortly after inauguration. But no, they disregarded the executive order. They took the 6 million worth of Bitcoin that we forfeited to them in Bitcoin, and they sold it immediately for dollars. So it was not added to the strategic Bitcoin reserve, which is something that the president should be aware of.
It is absolutely an executive order. They just took 127,000 Bitcoin from a scam, and we're holding on to that in the strategic reserve. Ask the Bitfinex guys how it's going, right? They still have that, but yet they sold
Right.
yours.
Yep.
Violation of a presidential executive order, a blatant disrespect to the president of the United States.
Correct.
Fascinating. So at this point in time, you're under house arrest, right? Your communications are confined. Are you talking with Bill at this time?
No, I'm not allowed to, unfortunately.
You're not allowed to talk to your business partner about a case that you're simultaneously both going through.
Correct. Yeah. I'm not allowed to talk to Bill without both of our lawyers present. Lawyers are about $2,500 each. So that's per hour. So that's an expensive conversation. So we haven't had communications throughout this whole proceeding, other than when we would be in courtroom together, in the courthouse together.
So in order to
But
get a message to him, you have to go through a $2,500 an hour lawyer, which drains your finances even further and restricts your ability to defend yourself, because the only way to defend yourself in court is monetarily by hiring lawyers. That is the only clause you have to fight back. So they give you this 5-year, $6 million penalty. And what are you thinking at this point?
I expected the 5 years. Again, we knew the judge was a max sentencer. So when I went in there, even though it's customarily expected that if you take a plea, there's some leniency shown, right? You didn't waste the court's time, you didn't waste resources. So maybe instead of 5 years, I'll give you 3 years. That I knew that wasn't going to happen. She was going to go the full 5. I knew about the $6.3 million forfeiture. We took care of that before even sentencing occurred. What I did not expect was the additional $250,000 fine she put on me.
For what?
As part of the punishment for this crime,
Just
she has the ability to include a fine up to $250,000, which she chose to do.
another maximum.
Yeah, another maximum. She knows, due to the way the court works, like they basically do like a mini audit on you. They take care, they do all
Yeah.
your finances.
They know
They see
everything.
what you have.
Yeah.
They know everything. So she knows I'm at zero. I have no money. I owe lawyers millions of dollars. I owe friends millions of dollars. I'm tapped out. She knows that, and she still put this $250,000 fine over my head. That was the only thing that surprised me in that sentencing. And I just, you go, how am I going to deal with this? And then you find out that fine earns interest while you're in prison.
Yeah. While you
So,
can't pay it, literally.
while you
at
can't
all.
pay it. Yeah. So yeah.
Now, you were also put into a prisoner's dilemma, right? A pure game theory prisoner's dilemma. You are separated from the co-defendant. You're not allowed to talk. And I remember you saying that this offer was given to you and it was contingent upon both of you taking it or none of you get it, right? That was
Yeah.
the key. You both had, and you couldn't talk to each other. This is a pure prisoner's dilemma. It is literally textbook game theory. They knew exactly what was going to happen from day one. And I'll make that assumption because I don't have any, I have nothing to hide. But when you bring in, your starting pitcher is, he's given some fastballs down the middle. So you bring in the closer to get the job done with the maximum sentence, maximum pain for the other person. And while you're in a position where you could collaborate and come up with ideas, you're put into this prisoner's dilemma, completely separated and having to pay $2,500 an hour to speak through an intermediary. And you both came to the same decision, which I don't see how Bill couldn't have taken that decision. I don't see how you couldn't have taken that decision. They always say there's, a guy in his 30s, guy in his 60s who are friends or business partners for 10 years, worked together previous for that. A lot of love in the relationship, I'm sure. And you're probably more concerned with him than yourself at this juncture because of his age. But man, the concise version of this, I think, hits home, right? Like the bringing in the closer early in the game, not in the last inning. And that shut it all down. You were probably looking forward to some form of trial, getting your message out there, talking about the Brady violation, telling your story in court in front of a jury. And here's the good and the bad part of this. And again, not an attorney. The bad part of this is you took a plea deal, which I don't think anyone in this country, they can say whatever they want. But when you're, I just interviewed the national spokesperson for Gun Owners of America, who actually stopped a mass shooting, was in a firefight, killed a guy to stop a shooting. And the way that he was described, you have no idea how you're going to react in these situations. None. It's no different. Your life is on the line the same way his life is on the line, in a different way. Yeah. And I think you're going to find some Bitcoiners and crypto people that are like, oh, it shouldn't take a plea deal if they were innocent. Now that you know the specs behind this case, and there are so many hours of interviews, which I hope you stop doing. I hope you spend time with your family. The only remedy for a plea deal is a pardon. The pardon's going to be difficult, just to be honest with you, because Jay Clayton's now head of Southern District of New York. He was appointed by Trump. He kicked off Choke Point 2.0. You can't deny that. There are these publicly known false allegations of money laundering intent. I do find it funny that they use a conspiracy charge on people, but yet when you bring up conspiracies, you're labeled. So our government is actually a conspiracy theorist, and they imprison people for their own conspiracy theories behind what your intent was. This is a flaw in the law. Like, I don't see how anyone cannot see that intent and conspiracy for something you haven't done yet should be I don't know the solution to it, but it should be refined. But at the same time, that's the bad. The good is where I think you should be seen as a hero in this space is, had you gone to trial and your gut assumption was that this judge was going to come to the same conclusion with probably a higher monetary penalty and many more years, 5 times the amount of years in prison, that would become a national precedent that essentially all potential, CoinJoin, Whirlpool style privacy technologies, it would be a national precedent that this would be the outcome for any allegation. And again, not a lawyer, but just having watched lawfare for the last 10 years in this country, that seems to be the case. But now there is no official ruling. There's a plea deal for something. So I think that you actually took the bullet for the community, and I don't think the community really understands that. Is that a pretty fair assessment?
Yeah, it's accurate. The only thing I would say is that legal precedent, true legal precedent, doesn't get set at district court, right? So had we gone to trial
Right.
and had we been found guilty, there would be something called persuasive authority, right? So other judges could look to the case and perhaps be persuaded that privacy is criminal, but it wouldn't be true legal precedent until we appealed and either won or lost at the appeal court, because that's where precedence is created. But persuasive authority is still pretty persuasive. And you're absolutely right that because there was a deal, there is none of that. There's no persuasive authority. There is no legal precedent. The case just is in a silo, right? And it stands by itself, and no one will be referring back to it for these cases. I will also say, though, around Jay Clayton in charge at the Southern District of New York, I agree that it's going to be hard to get a pardon because it's hard to get the attention of the president of the United States.
Absolutely,
He's the
especially right
president.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the president. However, I think we have one thing going for us is that this president uniquely has been targeted by an out of control Department of Justice. He's been targeted by the same out of control Department of Justice that targeted me
And the
and the
Southern District of
same
New York.
district in the same district.
Yeah.
So this is a man who I think is fundamentally a fair person, and I think is fundamentally a man who knows about deals and knows when the deal is good, but more importantly, knows when a deal is bad. And if he looked at our case, if we are managed to get it in front of him, which is hard but possible, he will
Mhm.
see a bad deal and he will see a weaponized Department of Justice. And I think he would do the right thing.
Well, he just did it with I forgot who it was, but I think it was like the president of Nicaragua or somewhere was arrested for 500 kilos of cocaine, and he said the guy didn't do it, so we set him free. You're clearly not a
Yeah.
money transmitter. That's the charge that you're being given. You're clearly not a money transmitter. The only fault you would have is, in my opinion, not an attorney. In my opinion, the only fault you would have is you stuck your neck out there with a meme. So this
Yeah.
is mimetic warfare being fought in courts, and your
Which
business
is
partner
something the president also understands. Sticking your
absolutely
neck out
understands.
there on social media.
And he also understands dumbing things down. The other comment of like, it's like
Right.
cleaning dirty Bitcoin. Like you explained, these are foreign speakers. That's an easy way to explain it. You're not
Yeah.
even in the comment. The interesting thing about printed word is it doesn't have emotion. So people can read it and take it any way they like. It's hard to understand sarcasm in tweets and posts. It's hard for a lot of people because they may not be in a sarcastic mood or have a good sense of humor. This judge does not sound like she has a sense of humor, yet alone a good one. Yeah, Keonne, I'm just some guy in a hoodie and doing a podcast with you here today. I'm just some normal guy, but I hope that this video gets the message out there. President Trump, I hope that you hear this message. I hope you see that the lawfare extends beyond your own sphere. I hope that you take action here if you're going to free a foreigner who was allegedly busted and convicted and sent to prison for running drugs. You said he didn't do that. I think it's pretty obvious when you look at the court case that and every litigator litigators, attorneys are very good to talk to for these things. You may not like hearing what they have to say, but they're balancing it out because they're saying this is how the judge saw it, this is how the prosecutor saw it, this is how the defender saw it. In the end, every one of them that I've talked to or listened to says that this case is ridiculous. Bitcoin Policy Institute said this case is ridiculous. Everyone I've talked to has literally said that this case is ridiculous. Yet, in the next couple of weeks, you're being sent to prison before Christmas. That's the end of the tale. I can't tell you how much this breaks my heart, man. I really can't. I can't thank you enough for your time. I don't want to take too much more of it because I'd rather you spend that with your family than being here on video. And more importantly, I really hope, guys like Puncher have been out there and Jesse and pushing the ball and Cedric. A lot of these folks, I don't think people, there's this tribalism in crypto, right? There's everyone has their coin and the thing that they think that will be the next thing. This is the dividing line. You know, there was so much noise and hype over a Ripple case, which was an interesting case where in the end it wasn't a security to retail, but it was found to be a security violation of security law to banks. I don't know why there hasn't been this type of hype over this. I know that there have been many different stories of samurai and the you know, you've become folklore in the space. And I think that if we get through the folklore and you read the court case, doesn't matter what your opinion is of what happened, just look at the process. When you're denying opinions or denying motions without an opinion, when you're bringing in a new judge midstream that shut it down, right? Like, so you're getting ready for trial. Now you're getting ready for a plea because of the change of judge and the history of that judge. And one of the attorneys on that space did a really good job of going through a lot of that judge's track record. And if you heard that space, which I don't remember and can't regurgitate, as soon as I heard her track record, I totally understood why you took the deal. This is scary stuff, guys. If it can have the one thing about the world we live in right now is don't be a cheerleader. Like, stop being a cheerleader for authoritarians, and it doesn't even matter if you like them or not. We cheerlead on decisions and, you know, all these other things. Just look at what happens to other people, because eventually, if you don't stop it politically and through the justice system, it's going to happen to you. I don't have the skill set to be able to create privacy tools. That's not my skill set. I hope that more privacy builders out there actually learn from this case and take a different approach that gets through the system. I hope the system is reversed, where you actually can be heard in court, because that's a constitutional right. Your story was never heard in a courtroom in front of a jury. That was never happened for you. And more importantly, I hope that people start to realize that there are innocent people who go to jail, and those innocent people deserve to not go to jail. That is how a legal system should work. It should be fair, balanced, and legal. I don't see anything in here. Of course, these things have happened in the past, but I've been trying to find a way to condemn you in some way for about 2 weeks now. And I was one of the guys who tweeted about the Samurai case 2 years ago. You know, I said, why is no one talking about this? You know, I hear about the tornado cash. I hear about Ripple. I hear about Kraken, Coinbase, all these other law. I hear about every other lawsuit but Samurai. Why am I not hearing about that? Kind of shows you the nature of the beast and how media and social persuasion is used to amplify or bury things that they want you to see or not want you to see. But take a fair, balanced approach. Is this a fair process? Are you and Bill being judged by a judge fairly? I don't think if the answer is yes, I would think that you need to reevaluate and watch some more interviews and get a detailed breakdown and not a concise one here today. But Keonne, I don't have a bat phone line to President Trump. If I did, I would use it. I certainly have been making phone calls for you for the last couple of weeks behind the scenes with a lot of folks to raise awareness. If anyone deserves a pardon in the financial sector, it's absolutely you. And I hope that you get it. And I just think it's going to be a very difficult process, but don't lose hope. Yeah. I'll give you an example. A guy I went to high school with, you can look him up. His name is Duke Tanner. He was a freshman when I was a senior, I think. He was a boxer, very well-known boxer, turned pro in boxing, got arrested under trumped-up drug charges. And a guy I personally know, Trump pardoned in his last administration. So I personally know someone who was pardoned by President Trump. And I think that we're going to see some activity in this. I don't know how soon it will be. I hope we can kickstart it with calm, detailed conversations like this. But in the end, you know, close us out here. You know, first of all, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for your family. And it doesn't get talked about a whole lot in financial and Bitcoin markets. The power of prayer is not only real, it's scientifically proven. You can look through white papers of patients with cancer who were prayed for and not prayed for. Whether you're a believer or not, there is a God. He does exist and he does listen to you. So I ask everyone out there to pray for you. There are ways to contribute to ongoing, you know, legal fees that you have right now. Can you walk us through those?
Yeah, so thank you for that, Eric. And I agree with you completely. I would ask your listeners to visit billandkeonne.org. That's BILLANDKEONNE.org. There's 2 calls to action there. The first is really important. Sign the petition. If you click on that link, it will go to the change.org petition, and please sign it if you agree that the president should give me and Bill a pardon. Share it with your friends, get your friends and family to sign it. And then the second call to action on that billandkeonne.org is a donation button through Give, Send, Go. And if you feel moved and want to help support our families, half of your contribution will go to my wife, Lauren, and then the other half will go to Bill's wife, Sabrina. And that will help ease the burden of having both of their husbands in federal prison for the next 5 and 4 years, and will help contribute to our, enormous legal bills and an additional $250,000 fine that we weren't expecting. Um, and if you can't donate, that's totally fine. But signing the petition is free. So please, please do it. It really actually does make a big difference. So the more signatures we get on that, the better our chances are. Thank you again, Eric, for having me on the show, giving me a chance to share my story, asking tough questions that can be referred back to by people who want to know more about this situation. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I've already signed the petition. I'll be making a donation myself, which I don't do very often publicly. I'll go anonymous. I don't really care. I think giving is giving. Guys, pray, sign the petition, support their families. I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine what my family would be going through at this juncture. I really can't. And I hope I never do. And I probably say enough dumb things online where eventually this is going to come back to me. But good Lord, Keonne. God bless you. God bless your family. God bless Bill. I've never spoken with Bill. I know he's not a big public speaker and doesn't want to be out here and at his age and where he's at. I get it. But guys, let's do everything we can to help these guys out. If you're not pitching in on this, you're not even signing the petition or retweeting or sharing or whatever it may be. Just know that eventually this stuff comes back to you. We got to stand together. We got to stand against tyranny. I think we have an administration that will listen. I think we have a president that has been through the same things you're going through right now. And I think that in the end, good prevails over evil in the end. And that's just the way it is. I just can't see it any different. So please, Keonne, if I can do anything to help you and your wife from a personal level, I'll send you my cell phone after this. If she needs anything, if there's any support I can give or anything I can do, please let me know.
Thank you very much, Eric.
All right.
God bless you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. God bless you. God bless this country. We'll see you next time here on the Rice Report. Have a good one, everybody.